The first shovel came up gray. Wet clay clung to the blade in a smooth, heavy slab. Nearly 100 people stood along the edge of Noah Mercer's field, watching Dr. Lena Ortiz turn the sample beneath the October sun. Farmers crowded beside conservation workers, bankers, co-op members, and neighbors who had spent 3 years arguing over whether the field could be saved. Across the circle, Wade Harlan folded his arms. For 3 years, Wade had called this ground dead. Roofing clay, a wheat farm, a banker's mistake. 2 weeks earlier, a contractor following Wade's instructions had cut through a contour berm near the property line. Then more than 4 inches of rain had torn across 11 acres, collapsed the demonstration pit, buried several sampling stakes, and carried away part of the residue Noah had spent years building. Now the first random sample looked exactly like the ground Wade had always described. Gray, smeared, nearly rootless. Wade glanced toward the Prairie Union Bank officer standing near the conservation trailer. Then he looked at Marcus Bell, the cattle operator carrying a 3-year grazing agreement inside his coat. "There's your black soil," Wade said. The men near the display table shifted their boots through the stubble. Marcus removed the agreement, looked at it, and folded it once. Ortiz scraped the shovel clean. "This point is damaged," she said. "We'll record it as damaged." "It's the point they picked," Wade answered. "Yes. And it failed. 1 point failed." Wade looked over the field. "Every good picture Mercer shows comes from the same few places. Let somebody else choose where the next shovel goes." Noah reached into the marker bucket and removed an orange flag. He held it toward Wade. "Then you pick the next one." The circle tightened around them. Wade stared at the flag. For 3 years, he had said Noah selected only the best patches. He had said the photographs were staged and the demonstrations were prepared for bankers. Now Noah was giving him the choice. Wade took the flag and started walking. He passed the restored grass strip. He moved away from the water line. He stopped on a dry rise where the soil had once broken into slabs behind a disc. He drove the flag into the ground. "Here." Ortiz wrote down the coordinates. Noah carried the old spade that had belonged to his father. At the edge of the crowd, Ray Collins held a mason jar filled with pale clay. A faded strip of masking tape remained across the glass, Mercer's black dirt. The jar had once sat beside the coffee pot at the co-op while men laughed. Now Ray held it against his coat without smiling. Noah set the spade beside Wade's flag. The surface crust cracked beneath his boot. The blade moved through the first 2 inches. Then it dropped. And 3 years of ridicule, debt, failure, and work came down to what Noah would find beneath the clay. South Clay Quarter covered 160 acres south of the Mercer home place near Fort Scott, Kansas. It had earned a name before Noah was born, Mercer's Brick. After a hard rain, water stood in shallow pools across the field. 7 days later, corn leaves curled from thirst. When the surface dried, it sealed into a crust. When a disc passed through it, the blades lifted slabs thick enough to stack beside a barn. The wheat harvest of 2021 averaged 28 bushels per acre across the worst sections. It was the 4th disappointing crop in 6 years. Noah Mercer was 49 years old then. He farmed 480 acres, repaired most of his own equipment, and rarely spent words trying to convince people who had already made up their minds. His father had died 7 years earlier. His mother, Ruth, still lived in the farmhouse where Noah had grown up. South Clay Quarter had never made the Mercers wealthy, but it connected the home place to the county road and carried the family name on every plat map in the courthouse. That fall, Wade Harlan arrived in a clean pickup with a written offer. Wade farmed 3,400 acres adjoining Noah's southern boundary. He raised cattle, grew wheat and soybeans, served on the local co-op board, and had enough money to make patients feel unnecessary. He placed the offer on Noah's workbench, $168,000. Wade said, "Cash at closing." Noah studied the number. It would pay down most of his operating debt. It would cover repairs on the combine, It would give him breathing room before spring. Wade tapped the paper. You fought that ground long enough. Noah looked through the open barn door toward the south quarter. I haven't figured out what's wrong with it. You know what's wrong. It's clay. That's what it is. Not what's wrong. Wade studied him for a moment. Then he folded the offer and left it on the bench. Ground doesn't care how stubborn you are. That afternoon, Noah carried a shovel into the field. He dug one hole near the road, one near the center, and one beside an old grass strip his father had never fully plowed under. In every hole, the roots behaved the same way. They grew downward for a few inches. Then they turned sideways. The plants were not simply running out of water. They were trapped above it. 2 weeks later, Wade turned the field into a joke at the co-op. Noah had gone in for hydraulic fittings and heard laughter before he reached the counter. Wade stood beside the coffee pot with 3 other farmers. 160 acres of roofing clay. He said, Mercer keeps planting seed on top of it like the ground might apologize. One of the men noticed Noah and lowered his cup. Wade turned. I gave you a fair offer. You did. You could put that money into ground that wants to farm. Noah placed the fittings on the counter. Maybe the ground needs something different. Dirt doesn't need anything except seed. Rain. And a farmer who knows when he's beaten. Wade had history on his side. Several farmers had rented South Clay Quarter before Noah took it back. They had tried deeper tillage, more nitrogen, different hybrids, and heavier equipment. The field responded for a season. Then it returned to the same pattern: water on top, dryness below, weak roots, falling yields. Noah paid for the fittings and carried them outside. That evening, he opened a metal cash box that had belonged to his father. Inside were machinery receipts, pencil sketches, rainfall notes, and field maps dating back to the 1980s. One page showed 2 curved grass strips crossing the south quarter. Beside them, his father had written, water stayed longer below the second strip. Another note, added years later, said, removed contour to make room for larger equipment. Noah read both sentences several times. His father had not solved the field, but he had noticed something. Noah called the county extension office. 3 days later, Dr. Lena Ortiz stood beside him in the south quarter. She carried a soil probe, 2 buckets, a clipboard, and no interest in telling Noah what he wanted to hear. He showed her his father's notes. Ortiz read them twice. This tells us where to look, she said. So you think the old strips mattered? I think your father noticed water movement. That isn't the same as proving why. She pushed the probe into the soil. At 6 inches, it slowed. At 9, she had to lean into it. Noah pointed to the notebook. He thought the field changed after they removed the contours. Maybe it did. She handed the notebook back. But a clue is not a system. They walked to the center of the quarter. The surface looked dry. Ortiz dug beneath it and squeezed a handful of clay. It smeared across her glove. You don't need a story about what this field used to be, she said. You need a baseline for what it is now. She explained that if Noah changed 10 things at once and the field improved, he would never know which change mattered. If it failed, he would not know what to correct. Before planting anything new, they measured the existing condition. They marked 12 permanent sampling points with steel stakes. They recorded root depth. They tested how long water took to enter the soil. At the hardest point, the infiltration test took nearly 47 minutes. They photographed the same locations. They collected samples from fixed depths. They measured organic matter. They recorded where roots turned sideways. They set aside 8 acres as a control strip where Noah would continue close to his previous system. He disliked leaving bad ground untreated. Ortiz insisted, you need something to compare against. What if the control performs better? Then you learn before you lose more money. That was the first thing Noah respected about her. She was willing to let the measurements prove him wrong. In the spring of 2022, Noah stopped full-width tillage across most of South Clay Quarter. He planted cover crops, instead of committing the entire field to another cash crop. Oh, rye, triticale, radish, winter, pea, lauter, he added, sorghum sudangrass, cowpea, and sunflower, to selected paddocks. Seed cost money. Custom drilling cost more. When Noah placed the order at the co-op, Wade studied the invoice. You're planting crops you won't harvest. I'm growing roots. You can't deposit roots at the bank. I know what a bank takes. Wade leaned against the counter. A farmer raises something he can sell. Noah raises explanations. The men beside the coffee pot laughed. Wade opened the door, scraped a handful of gray clay from the bed of Noah's pickup, and dropped it into an empty mason jar. He taped a label across the glass. Mercer's Black Dirt. He placed the jar on the shelf. Leave that here, he said. We'll see how black Noah can make it. Noah signed the seed receipt. Wade tapped the jar. He calls it soil rebuilding because failed crop doesn't look good on a bank report. Noah carried the paperwork outside. Behind him, Wade added, planting weeds and moving cattle doesn't make a soil man. That first year nearly proved him right. A dry spring delayed germination. The summer mix emerged unevenly. In the hardest sections, radishes stayed small and twisted. A windstorm dropped part of the temporary fence. 23 stocker cattle entered the wrong paddock and grazed 9 acres, far shorter than Noah intended. Then a water line split at a coupling. By the time he found it, thousands of gallons had run down a tire track and pooled in the lowest section. The quarter looked worse than it had under wheat. Bare patches, uneven growth, cattle tracks, weeds along the road. By October, Noah had no meaningful crop income from most of those acres. He had spent thousands of dollars and produced photographs that made Wade's jokes easier. Ortiz met him at the sampling stakes. Do you want to stop? She asked. Noah looked over the failed summer stand. Do the measurements say stop? Not yet. Then we measure again. The first year results were mixed. A few points showed slightly better infiltration. Most showed little change. One compacted area had worsened because the cattle entered when the soil was too wet. Ortiz circled the section in red. You damaged this paddock. Noah looked at the hoof marks. That goes in the report. He documented the fence failure, the overgrazing, the water leak, the poor emergence. He kept the bad photographs with the good ones. He was not building a sales presentation. He was building a history that could be checked. By January 2023, the project had consumed enough cash that Noah began considering the only valuable possession he could sell without placing more of the farm at risk. He washed the 1972 Ford F-100 his father had restored. Then he placed a small for-sale card inside the windshield. Wade saw it when he drove past the Mercer barn on his way to the south boundary. A week later, Noah's operating line came up for review. He still owed approximately $92,000. The meeting took place in a small conference room at Prairie Union Bank. The loan officer sat at one end. Noah sat opposite him. Wade attended because his offer to purchase South Clay Quarter remained active. The banker reviewed the numbers. Your input cost increased. Yes. Your cash crop revenue from the quarter decreased. Yes. And the soil data is not yet showing a major financial return. Not yet. Wade leaned back. This is what I've been saying. The banker looked at him. Wade continued. His father fought that field for 30 years. The only thing he ever grew there was debt. Noah's expression remained still. Wade looked directly at him. Now he's selling his father's Ford to repeat the lesson. The banker shifted in his chair. Wade kept going. Sell the quarter before your mother loses the house trying to protect your pride. The room fell silent. Noah placed both hands on the table. Leave my mother out of your offer. Wade's mouth tightened. I'm talking about risk. You were talking about my mother. The banker cleared his throat. Noah, what are you asking for? Until November 15th. 2024. That's 21 months. Yes. What happens then? You'll have 3 years of field data, a control strip, operating costs, and an independent assessment. Wade smiled. And if it still doesn't work? Noah looked at him. Then I'll know what I'm selling. The banker agreed to extend the timeline, but only with conditions. Noah had to control spending. He had to maintain payments on the remaining farm. He had to demonstrate that South Clay Quarter could support future income. By November 15th, 2024, he needed a signed contract, verified production value, or another documented revenue source from the quarter. Without one, the bank would not finance seed and fertilizer for the following spring. The bank would expect a sale. After the meeting, Wade submitted a revised offer, $149,000, $19,000 less than before. His letter explained that the field had continued to deteriorate, that weed and production risks had increased, and that the reduced price reflected current conditions. The language sounded reasonable. That made it harder to fight. Continuing the project required money. Noah did not have. The fencing needed improvement. The water system needed repair. He needed seed, testing, and access to a no-till drill at the correct planting window. The bank would not increase his unsecured credit. Ruth still lived in the family house. Noah refused to use it as additional collateral. The Ford sold to a collector from Oklahoma for $18,500. Before the buyer drove away, Noah opened the glove box. Inside was an old spare key with a cracked leather tag, Mercer Farm. The buyer looked at it. "You can keep that." Noah closed his hand around the key. He watched the truck disappear down the gravel road. That evening, Ruth stood in the empty space in the barn. She looked at the oil stain where the Ford had rested. Was the field worth the truck, she asked. Noah looked toward South Clay Quarter. "I don't know yet." He used the money to repair water lines, strengthen fencing, pay for seed, reserve the drill, and mount a camera above the main gate. The camera was meant to record cattle arrivals, departures, and grazing dates against his field logs. Over 3 years, direct spending on seed, drilling, fencing, water equipment, testing, and erosion work would climb to roughly $31,600. That did not include the income Noah had given up by taking acres out of conventional production. That night, he placed the Ford's spare key in the cash box beside his father's field notebook. The empty space in the barn looked larger than the truck had. In the second year, Noah simplified the system. He reduced the number of species in sections where establishment had been poor. He stopped treating every acre as though it carried the same problem. He moved cattle only when the surface was firm enough to carry them. He shortened grazing periods. He extended recovery time. He restored 2 sections of the old contour grass strips shown on his father's map. He did not claim the system was perfectly no-till. Where erosion had opened a scar, he repaired it. Where soil tests called for lime, he applied it. Where nutrients were deficient, he corrected them. Wade called the approach inconsistent. Ortiz called it management. In June, a storm dropped nearly 2 inches of rain. The control strip sealed over. Water collected in shallow depressions. In the restored section, residue softened the impact of the rain. The surface still became wet, but it did not form the same hard crust. Noah pushed a shovel beneath the residue. The topsoil was not black. It had not transformed into prairie ground, but small, darker crumbs held together around the roots. When he touched them, they broke apart instead of smearing. Ortiz crouched beside him. "Photograph it." Noah took pictures from the marked location. "Is this proof?" "It's evidence." "What's the difference?" "Proof survives other people choosing where to look." The second-year infiltration tests improved at several points. Root depth increased in the better-managed sections. The control strip changed very little. The improvement remained uneven. 18 acres along Wade's boundary still lagged behind. Before Noah could build on the first clear signs of progress, a photograph of South Clay Quarter appeared on the co-op bulletin board. It showed sunflowers, residua, broadleaf plants, and uneven green strips. The mason jar sat beneath the photograph. Someone had written, "Mercer's Weed Farm." During a co-op board discussion, Wade did not directly accuse Noah of violating any rule. He held up the photograph. "I'm not accusing anybody," he said. "I'm asking whether one man's experiment should become everybody else's weed problem." Within a week, the county weed department received a complaint. The inspector arrived on a Tuesday morning. Noah showed him seed labels, planting logs, grazing plans, and maps. Most of what appeared in the photograph had been planted intentionally. A few problem weeds had emerged along the roadside. The inspector issued no major violation, but he required Noah to control the roadside strip before seed set. The work took 3 days. Those were 3 days Noah should have spent moving cattle and repairing fence. One paddock remained occupied longer than planned. The animals grazed it shorter than he wanted, reducing its recovery period and weakening the value of that season's comparison. At the co-op, Wade denied filing the complaint. "I'm not the only man who can see a weed," he said. Noah placed a roll of fencing staples on the counter. "No." Wade waited for an accusation. Noah collected his receipt and left. 4 days after Wade's spray crew treated soybeans along the property line, damage appeared in Noah's cover crop. First, the cowpea leaves curled. Then, the sunflowers twisted. The radish leaves yellowed along the edges. Within a week, much of the broadleaf cover on 18 acres had died. The rye survived. From the county road, the paddock looked like another failed planting. Without enough forage, Noah could not graze the section as planned. He purchased $6,700 worth of hay to carry the cattle through the shortage. The loss did more than cost money. It erased a season of diverse root growth in one of the weakest parts of the field. Wade drove over when the crop consultant arrived. "You blaming me?" he asked. Noah photographed the damage line. "I'm documenting it. My crew sprayed my field. The plants show where the wind went." Wade looked across the boundary. A band of damaged cover ran almost parallel to his soybeans. "Maybe those miracle plants aren't as tough as you advertised." Noah closed the camera case. "I never advertised a miracle. Wind isn't anybody's property." "No." Noah looked toward the damaged plants, "but the evidence belongs in the file." The consultant collected samples. Noah downloaded hourly wind data from the nearest weather station. He marked the first day symptoms appeared. He saved invoices. He submitted an insurance claim. The investigation could not establish intent. Insurance eventually covered part of the direct crop damage, but not the lost season of root development, the disruption to grazing, or the full hay bill. At the co-op, Wade called the claim an attempt to make somebody else pay for weak crops. Noah replanted what he could. He left a small marked section untreated, so the damage pattern remained visible. That decision cost forage. It also preserved the condition for future inspection. By the spring of 2024, the third-year measurements finally showed a consistent pattern. In the managed sections, water entered the ground faster. Root channels extended deeper. Residue kept the surface cooler. The soil held together in smaller aggregates. After rainfall, the field could carry equipment sooner without smearing. The control strip still sealed. The damaged boundary section remained behind. Ortiz reviewed the data at Noah's kitchen table. "You have enough for other people to examine." Noah looked at the charts. "Not enough to make them agree. That isn't the goal." "What is?" "To let them test it." Ortiz proposed a field day with the local conservation district and a small soil health team. They would use randomly selected points. They would compare managed ground with the control strip. They would include the failures as well as the improvements. Noah agreed. When the announcement reached the co-op, Wade laughed. "He's holding an open house for dirt." One farmer asked whether Wade planned to attend. "I wouldn't miss it." Wade pointed towards several photographs Noah had submitted with the announcement. "Every one of those pictures comes from the same 3 good spots. Let somebody else choose where the shovel goes." Ray Collins glanced at the mason jar on the shelf. Noah heard about the remark later that afternoon. He added one note to the field day plan: sampling points selected publicly. The soil was improving. The financial problem remained. Prairie Union Bank did not lend money because dirt looked healthier. The loan officer reminded Noah that the deadline was November 15th. "You need a path to income." "Understood." Cover crops don't service debt by themselves. I'm working on that. A cattle operator named Marcus Bell heard about Noah's field through Ortiz. Bell managed stocker cattle for several owners in eastern Kansas and western Missouri. He needed seasonal grazing with reliable fencing, water, forage records, and clear movement plans. He visited South Clay Quarter in August. He inspected the water lines. He opened valves at the far paddocks. He walked the cattle lanes. He asked how long animals remained in each section. He reviewed rainfall notes and forage measurements. The darker soil did not interest him by itself. He wanted to know whether the system could support cattle without destroying the ground. I'm not paying for a theory. Bell said, I wouldn't ask you to. Bell pointed toward the weak boundary paddock. What happened there? Spray drift. Can you prove it? I can prove the damage pattern. I can't prove intent. Bell nodded. That answer mattered. He proposed a 3-year seasonal grazing agreement with a minimum payment of $24,000 per season, subject to annual forage reviews, stocking limits, and soil protection terms. It would not erase Noah's $92,000 operating balance. It would give the bank a documented revenue stream the quarter had never produced before. Bell would sign only after the field day. If that ground fails under weather and animal traffic, I need to know before cattle arrive. Noah understood. The buyer had not come to rescue him. He had come to determine whether the system worked. 2 weeks before the field day, Wade called Noah from the south boundary. Water had collected near one of Wade's field entrances following a storm. Wade believed the restored contour berm on Noah's side was slowing drainage. It's backing water onto me, Wade said. It's spreading runoff before it reaches the swale. It's a pile of dirt. It's inside my survey line. I'm clearing my ditch. Noah sent Wade a copy of the survey. He sent photographs of the grassed contour. He sent a written warning that removing the berm could concentrate water across South Clay Quarter. The Weather Service was already predicting a major storm within 48 hours. The contractor Wade hired called before beginning work. He says the line is marked. The contractor told Wade, "You sure you want that berm cut?" Wade looked toward the darkening western sky. His dirt project doesn't get to flood my beans. Could it? The next morning, an excavator arrived. Noah was delivering hay 20 miles away. The gate camera he had installed to document cattle movement captured the machine entering. The contractor widened the channel. Then the bucket crossed the boundary and cut through part of the contour berm. The work lasted less than 2 hours. When Noah returned, pale clay lay exposed in a fresh trench. He called Wade. You crossed the line. We cleared what was obstructing water. You had the survey. You had a berm causing a problem. I warned you what would happen. Wade's voice hardened. You think every raindrop in this county belongs to your experiment. Noah looked at the cut in the earth. I think gravity belongs to everybody. He ended the call. Rain began the following night. By midnight, water was moving through the channel. Wade's contractor had widened. Without the contour berm, it did not spread slowly into the grass strip. It accelerated. The flow entered Noah's field in a concentrated line. Residue lifted. Soil moved. A shallow cut became a channel. Then the channel widened. Noah stood in the rain with a flashlight, unable to stop it. By morning, 11 acres carried visible erosion. The prepared soil pit had collapsed. Several sampling stakes were buried. A strip of pale clay ran through the field like an open wound. Photographs appeared online before noon. One caption read, 3 years of black dirt gone in one night. Another placed a picture of the co-op mason jar beside the erosion channel. Wade did not post the images. He did not need to. The county already knew the joke. Marcus Bell called, Is the field day still happening? Yes. You've got erosion. 11 acres. You lost the prepared pit. Yes. Bell paused. If the inspection is canceled, I can't hold the contract. I understand. An hour later, the banker called. If the field day failed to produce an independent report, the bank would rely on the previous appraisal. That appraisal valued South Clay Quarter as declining ground with uncertain income. Without the report and Bell's agreement, Wade's reduced purchase offer might become Noah's only path before November 15th. Ortiz arrived that afternoon. She walked the damaged area without speaking. Finally, she stopped beside the collapsed pit. We can cancel. Noah looked across the erosion channel. If we cancel, what does that prove? Nothing scientifically. It will prove plenty at the bank. The prepared site is gone. Then don't use a prepared site. Ortiz studied him. The first random point may land inside this damage. It might. The sample could look worse than your baseline. It could. Bell may walk away. That's his right. She closed her clipboard. What do you want them to see? What happens when the plan fails? The field day drew nearly 100 people. Farmers, bankers, conservation staff, co-op members, neighbors who had laughed, neighbors who had quietly hoped Noah was right. Marcus Bell stood near the back with the unsigned agreement inside his coat. The Prairie Union loan officer remained beside the conservation trailer. Ray Collins arrived carrying the mason jar. The faded label still read, Mercer's Black Dirt. He lifted it when Noah passed. Thought you might need a sample container. A few men smiled. Noah looked at the jar. Keep it close. Wade positioned himself near the front. Ortiz explained the rules. No samples would come from locations Noah selected. The prepared pit would not be used. Attendees would choose the points in public. The first flag landed near the erosion channel. The shovel came up gray. The soil smeared. The structure was poor. Wade looked toward the banker. There's your black soil. Several people stepped away from the pit. Marcus removed the agreement from his coat and folded it once. Ortiz faced the crowd. This point was damaged when concentrated runoff crossed the field. It will be recorded exactly as we found it. Wade shook his head. It's the point they picked. Yes. And it failed. One damaged point failed. That's the real field. The real field includes every result. Not only the one that supports your argument. Noah numbered the sample, sealed the bag, and placed it beside the others. The second flag landed inside the control strip. The surface was hard. Roots turned sideways. Water remained inside the infiltration ring. Ortiz pressed the sample beneath her thumb. It smeared across her glove. She prepared to select the third location. Wade objected. Put it near his water line and you'll find whatever he wants you to find. Noah removed another flag from the bucket. He held it out. Then you pick the next one. Wade stared at him. The crowd waited. He took the flag. He walked past the restored grass strip, past the demonstration area, past the water system. He chose a dry rise in the western paddock. That was the worst ground on this farm before he started. Ortiz recorded the coordinates. Noah placed his father's spade beside the marker. The surface crust resisted. The first inches broke in a pale slab. Then the blade dropped. When Noah lifted the block, the outside remained gray-brown clay. Inside, the structure had changed. Dark aggregates rolled across the shovel. Fine white roots ran vertically through narrow channels. Soil clung to those roots in nearly black bands. Boots shifted through the stubble as the circle tightened around the blade. Ortiz pressed the managed sample between her fingers. It crumbled. She pressed the control strip sample. It smeared. Ray lowered the mason jar. Wade stared at the shovel. Dig anywhere deep enough and you'll find dark dirt. Ortiz placed a ruler beside the sample. This is not deep. She pointed to the roots. The change begins near the surface and follows living root channels through the clay. Wade shook his head. One lucky pocket. Noah handed him another flag. Pick another. Wade took it immediately. He walked farther north and chose a patch that had been grazed 6 weeks earlier. Noah dug. The improvement was weaker than the first sample. The soil was not uniformly dark. Part of the block still smeared, but the same pattern appeared around the roots. Dark aggregates. Vertical channels. Better structure than the control. Wade selected a third managed location. The new sample was stronger. The surface remained clay. The material beneath it separated into stable crumbs. Several roots passed through a depth where the baseline photographs showed them turning sideways. Noah set down the spade. Ortiz called everyone toward the display table. She showed the original baseline, 47-minute infiltration at the hardest point. Shallow roots. Surface crusting. Low organic matter. She showed the first-year failures. The overgrazed paddock, the water leak, the poor establishment. She showed the second-year spray damage, the dead broadleaf strip, the hay invoices. She showed the erosion channel created after the contour berm was removed. Every weak point remained in the presentation. Then she displayed the third-year finding. Infiltration had improved significantly across several managed locations. Root depth had increased. Aggregate stability was stronger. Surface temperatures beneath residue were lower. The control strip had changed little. The spray-damaged section remained behind. The erosion channel had lost structure and residue. One farmer crouched beside the shovel. So he found black soil under the clay? Ortiz shook her head. He did not uncover a buried layer. She held up the managed sample. The clay is still here. What changed is the structure around living roots. She lifted the control sample. The control strip did not show the same change. She pointed toward the dark bands. Roots. Residue. Water movement. Reduced disturbance. Grazing management. And time allowed carbon and biological activity to begin rebuilding structure inside soil that had been sealed and compacted. How long until the whole field looks like that? Someone asked. Longer than 3 years. That answer gave the moment credibility. Noah had not defeated clay. He had shown that it could change. Ray unscrewed the lid of the mason jar. He poured the original gray clay onto the baseline tray. Ortiz brushed the glass clean and placed part of the sample from Wade's first selected location inside. She left the faded label where it was. Mercer's black dirt. The men near the display table lowered their coffee cups. Marcus Bell unfolded the grazing agreement. He did not sign because the soil looked dark. He asked Noah to walk the water system with him. Bell opened valves at the far paddocks. He examined the fencing. He followed the lane cattle would use between sections. He checked grazing dates, rest periods, and forage estimates. He asked what happened when rainfall made the surface too soft. We delay the move. And if forage comes up short, you hear it from me before the cattle arrive. Bell pointed toward the spray-damaged acreage. You'll include those 18 acres in the agreement? No. Why not? They aren't ready. Wade stood beside the water trough. You're passing up rent because 18 acres aren't pretty? Noah looked at him. I'm not renting him photographs. Bell smiled once. He reopened the agreement he had folded after the first gray sample. The contract covered 3 years of seasonal grazing, with a minimum payment of $24,000 per season, subject to annual forage reviews, stocking limits, water access, and written soil protection terms. The money would not make Noah wealthy. It created reliable income. It supported the operating line. It allowed the recovery work to continue without selling the quarter. Bell signed first. Then he handed the pen to Noah. The bank officer stepped forward. I'll need a copy of the final report and the signed agreement. Not congratulations. Not praise. A request for documentation. That mattered more. Ray Collins stood beside the display table. 3 years earlier, he had laughed when Wade called South Clay Quarter roofing clay. Now he looked at Noah. What did that seed mix cost per acre? Noah told him. What did you change after the first year? I stopped treating every acre like it had the same problem. Ray nodded. You still have Ortiz's number? Wade stood close enough to hear. The public reversal did not sound like cheering. It sounded like farmers asking about seed costs, grazing periods, infiltration tests, and how many acres should remain in a control strip. The people who had questioned whether Noah was a real farmer were asking how he had measured the ground. Prairie Union Bank renewed Noah's operating line before the November 15th deadline. The decision rested on the grazing agreement, the updated appraisal, and 3 years of documented field results. Not one shovel of dark soil. The erosion damage became a separate matter. The survey showed that the contractor had crossed Noah's boundary. The gate camera confirmed the time and the equipment. The emails showed that Wade had received a warning before the excavation began. Wade's insurer agreed to cover the documented restoration costs. The settlement funded reconstruction of the contour berm, reseeding of the damaged section, additional soil tests, and part of the lost forage. There was no enormous judgment. Wade kept his farm. Noah recovered only what the evidence supported. The co-op board adopted a new recusal policy for members involved in adjoining land disputes or active purchase negotiations. Because Wade still had an offer on South Clay Quarter when the weed issue was discussed, he could no longer participate in future board matters involving Mercer Farm. He remained on the board. He remained successful. But his private interest could no longer be presented as a neutral opinion. The rebuilt contour berm was wider than the original. Grass covered it by the following spring. During the first heavy rain, Noah stood beside it with Ortiz. Water reached the contour. It slowed. It spread. Then it entered the ground instead of cutting across the field. Ortiz watched the flow disappear beneath the residue. The whole quarter still needs work. Noah nodded. The clay pan is still there. Some sections remain weak. That's where we start next. She smiled. You're difficult to impress. Noah watched water settle around the roots. I've seen what happens when a man gets impressed too early. Wade came to Mercer Farm 2 months later. He arrived alone. No lawyer. No co-op members. No revised purchase offer. Noah met him near the rebuilt berm. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Wade looked across South Clay Quarter. I thought you were trying to prove everybody else was stupid. I was trying to keep the ground. I believed the berm was backing water onto me. You had the survey and the warning. Wade nodded. I used your first-year failure like it proved the third year. Noah waited. Wade looked toward the repaired channel. I treated your boundary like it mattered less, because I thought your system was foolish. It was not a perfect apology, but it named the wrong. Wade asked whether Noah would look at an 80-acre field on the west side of his operation. Water stood there after rain. Soybean roots stayed shallow. Noah could have laughed. He could have reminded Wade of the mason jar. He could have named a price designed to humiliate him. Instead, he wrote Ortiz's number on the back of an old feed receipt. Start with a baseline. Wade took it. The same place you started? The same place you told me not to start. Where's that? With what the ground can prove. Wade held out his hand. Noah shook it. The handshake did not restore their old relationship. It did not erase the spray damage. The reduced offer, the public insults, or the cut through the berm. It closed the argument without turning Noah into the kind of man he had fought. That winter, Noah opened his father's metal cash box. He removed the old field notebook. Beside it lay the cracked leather key tag from the Ford. Mercer Farm. Noah placed his own 3-year field book next to his father's. The first page held the original baseline. 47-minute infiltration. Shallow roots. Surface crusting. Low organic matter. The final page contained no claim that the work was finished. It listed what remained. Repair the damaged 11 acres. Improve the weak boundary paddock. Continue annual testing. Protect living roots. Never graze wet ground. Keep the control strip for 1 more year. At the bottom, Noah wrote one sentence. The field was not dead. We had stopped asking what it needed. The mason jar never returned to the co-op. Ortiz placed it inside a display case at the Conservation District office. 3 jars stood together. The original gray baseline sample, the unchanged control strip soil, the 3rd-year sample taken from the location Wade selected. Each jar carried a date, depth, and coordinate. The old masking tape label remained on the 3rd sample, Mercer's black dirt. It was not displayed as a trophy. It was displayed as evidence. South Clay Quarter never became perfect. Some summers remained too dry. Some springs stayed too wet. Clay remained clay, but roots moved through places where they had once turned sideways. Rain entered ground where it had once stood in pools. Cattle produced income without stripping the surface bare, and when Noah pushed his father's spade beneath the pale crust, dark soil continued forming along the paths made by living roots. It was not hidden treasure. It was not a shortcut. It was 3 years of failure, measurement, sacrifice, pressure, and work. Wade had chosen the location himself. The evidence had survived every joke, and the truth had finally become visible beneath the clay.